Why am I working this hard and still stressed about money? That might be what you're asking yourself because some contractors are doing hundreds of thousands, even millions in revenue, and still don't understand why there's never enough money left over.
No more burnout, no more fear. We'll build it strong, make it clear. Not just a grind, but a dream that's true. Building a business that works for you.
Today, we're uncovering the hidden numbers behind profitable construction businesses. And contractors, if you're doing a great work, but you still feel invisible online, that is a problem too. At D&D Business Systems, we help contractors get seen, build trust, and generate consistent opportunities through smart marketing and automation systems. Get your free AI visibility scan today at ai-visibility-fix.com. And once you know those leads start coming in, the next question becomes, are those jobs actually profitable? Because the truth is, more work doesn't automatically create more profit. In fact, a lot of contractors are busier than ever, bringing in more revenue than ever, and still wondering why the money feels tight at the end of the month. That's why today's conversation matters. Welcome back to the Builder's Edge. This is the podcast where we help contractors and trades professionals build smarter, scale stronger, and stop leaving that money on the table. And I'm your host, Deanna Lucas, and today's conversation is one every contractor needs to hear because being busy doesn't always mean being profitable. So, when am I working? Why am I working this hard and still stressed about money? That's exactly what we're diving into today. Joining me is Amanda Dilenno, who specializes in helping contractors understand the numbers behind their business, from job costing and profit margins to hidden overhead expenses and the real cost of underbidding your jobs. Let's get into it. Welcome, Amanda.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. I'm doing quite well today. Thanks. So, Amanda, tell us a little bit about your background and how you ended up specializing in this bookkeeping and profitability for contractors specifically.
Sure. So, my name is Amanda Dilenno. I went and actually was an accountant by trade for over 25 years, and I worked with corporate America. And I worked in a healthcare system where we would go and do percentage of completion revenue recognition. So as you have a job, you only recognize a certain amount, of revenue within that month. So as work's being done, that's when we would recognize. But we wanted to make sure, we wanted to see what was profitable, what products or services were profitable. So we would go and make sure that we were doing a profit margin analysis on each project.
Okay. Well, how did that lead to you into helping contractors? That's the healthcare business.
So yeah, so around COVID, I got to a point in my life where there was no work-life balance, and then it took a couple years to figure out, what I really wanted to do. And I like to help people. My dad is blue collar, my husband's blue collar, and they always work with their hands. So since I have an accounting background and I wanted to become a business owner, I thought about bookkeeping, and my niche is the trades because they want to do outside work. They want to work with their hands. They don't want to have to work in the computer, do the numbers, like track things. So I help them with that.
Very important. A
Yeah.
very important piece, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, you're
Yes.
right. Most tradespeople, especially those specializing in a trade, they're like artists. They're like craftsmen. They create and they do that type of thing, working with their hands and producing something. And often this stuff is definitely boring. It's important stuff, but I'm sure they find it boring and not really what they want to spend their time on. So, what did you see that your father and your husband struggled with the most with their accounting and bookkeeping?
So they would be going out, having their passion, doing their passion, but then they would come home exhausted, and then they'd have to come home and do their books because they hadn't had a bookkeeper. They were missing Sunday dinners because they were working on their books. They were getting confused. They weren't categorizing correctly. But then they were like waking up at 2 in the morning. Am I going to get payroll? Am I going to be able to pay this? Because when you look at your bank account and just those numbers, it really doesn't represent the whole picture. So
No,
signing into
absolutely
your
not.
bank and looking, you're not remembering, oh, you already have an audit draft that's coming up, for insurance, or, oh, you paid a check on something that has not gone through yet. So just looking at the bank balance is not really going to help. Um,
Sure.
so it was just a couple things where they would just, get frustrated and just leave it. Or they, like I said, be too exhausted, at night to actually deal with it. Um, so it went a step further when I would help look at the books. I'm like, but we couldn't figure out which job was profitable. So we just went back to the basics, and my husband was a landscaper. So I had helped him through that. And I'm like, let's go job per job. So because you might have a job that is an acre of land, you might have a job that is half an acre. They have different weighted averages,
Right.
with the money coming in. So that's why I had thought, you know what? We can go and do a weighted average on our indirect costs. We'll take, our price, less all of our supplies, all the payroll, but then also our indirect costs just to see what that,
Okay.
sorry.
That's okay. Just to see that, what
Well,
that.
I was gonna say just to see that specific project margin or profit margin. And it's
Okay.
like, is this what we expected? And if it was, that's great. If it was low, why? If it was high, that's great. So we just wanted to analyze and at least have the data. And you could be fine with the profit margin you have, but at least you know what the profit margin is.
Okay. So let's talk about back to about busy but broke. Why do you think so many contractors stay busy year round? Some of them have seasonal work, but they stay busy year round but still feel stressed financially.
Well, there are some times where they don't know what they're subscribing to, or maybe they realize they subscribe to something and then they're subscribing again. So it could be duplicates. It could be they have delay on backlog, with supplies. Maybe sometimes the other contractors that were in front of them before they're lagging. The other thing is consumer price index. They don't increase their prices as the government is increasing prices.
So you think it's they feel stressed because they're not coming up with they're not dialing in their quotes. Is that what you're
Correct.
saying?
Yes. So sometimes they think, oh, in their head, so they're emotional about it, this is too high, but really it could be a standard price. You don't want to price gouge the community around you and try and do the lowest bid and then shortcut on everything. You want to give a good ethical price, but you want to make sure you are increasing per your consumer price index, what those percentages are.
Absolutely. Yeah, I tell this all the time on this podcast and to all my contractors. The first thing I try to get them to do is up their prices, just simply by because um, to a couple reasons. The biggest reason is that you don't want the client that wants the cheapest price.
Yeah.
That is the client you want to get as far from as you possibly can. It never fails. That client is always it's like the client is specifically wanting the cheapest price, mostly because the client has, maybe it's a financial issue with them. They just, don't have a whole lot of money. So now they have a very slim margin themselves. And then they try to maximize it. They stress over it. It it seems like, they're the ones that you can't ever please. Just all kind of problems in there. So that's not
The other thing, I'm sorry to interrupt, the
go ahead.
clients actually don't understand the value that you're providing. You know the skill, you're doing it safety wise, the healthy way. So that's another thing, don't let the client, because they can't afford you, to try and, lower your bid. You are providing value to them.
Absolutely. And but the client that understands value is going to be the client that either decides, yes, I can afford this or I can't. But there is a client out there that no matter the value, they want the cheapest. Like if they got 10 bids, they would be whether they won't even look to see if they're comparing apples to apples,
Right.
right?
Correct.
They're just going to be grabbing the cheapest one, and that's not the client that you want. But
Right.
there are other clients that if you show the value, um, for instance, I hate ceramic tile. Every home improvement job I did that I used tile, refused to use it. It is the cheapest. You just, you drop a hairbrush on it and it wants to crack. You walk over it, it wants to crack. So all of my tile jobs were done with a porcelain tile. You can take a hammer and hit it and it doesn't move. Like, I love that stuff. So, your clients have to make sure you have to make sure your clients understand that they're comparing apples to apples. And then if somebody sees the value in what you're bringing, what in your product, in your maybe the process as well. I had a different grouting process, which was fabulous. I think if they see that, then they'll understand that value. But yes, it's definitely, you have to make sure that you're not the cheapest on the block and that, you are adding that value and that you're profitable and checking all of those prices. My goodness, especially right after COVID, they changed daily. It was horrible pricing jobs after COVID for sure.
Yeah.
What are some warning signs that a contractor has a profitability problem?
Well, they're wondering if they're going to be able to pay their payroll. Maybe their credit card is almost to the max where they're not able to pay off, that credit, things like that. Like they don't have a clear bookkeeping system. So I know we were talking about, job costing, but it is important to have a good bookkeeping system, as well, because it
Absolutely.
gives that clarity. It shows you the cash flow. And there's times where if you do need loans from the banks, if you are having these clean books, you're able to give those reports to the bankers, and then they're the ones who are giving you that money.
Yeah. So, we use this term revenue. And, we think about revenue versus profit. Why is revenue such a misleading number for contractors?
Well, earlier I had indicated that you can only recognize a certain amount of that revenue. So, say you have 50,000, you're not getting that 50,000 up front, right? You only would be able to recognize, percentages completion. So, say you have 100 hours, that first month you only use 20. So, that's only 20% of that 50,000 that you can actually recognize at that time, because we have IRS and GAAP rules and things like that.
Sure.
So a lot of people are like, thinking the cash is the same as revenue, and that is not, the case.
Okay. So, what numbers should they focus on?
Well, they definitely want to, focus on the profitability, the net income, after all their expenses, whether it's the indirect ones, the overhead ones, the cost of goods sold, the supplies for that specific job. So it's the profit margin and definitely the net income of the business.
Okay. Okay. So, we talked about that underbidding can be a problem. Why do so many contractors, I'm sure, hopefully, they're only accidentally underbidding their jobs?
Well, sometimes they're just starting out and they're like, I don't care, a client's a client. But I have seen that over and over again where you can't scale your business, when you don't have that extra income to be able to, get another employee. So, that's things that you have to definitely watch out for.
Yeah. Yeah. You talk about scaling. Yes. Definitely until, guys and girls out there, until you know what your margins are and what your pricing is really, if you're really being profitable in your pricing, please don't try to scale. That's the wrong time to scale. It's when you know your numbers and you're confident about them that you can really, put that in there.
The other thing is equipment fails. You might have to get a
True.
new piece of equipment. So when you're not, having that profitable job, you don't have those extra funds to go and put to the side. So when repairs are needed, or say you don't own a piece of equipment that you actually need to use for this job, being able to rent it out and things like that, there's those extra costs that weren't really in line with the profit margin that you were thinking about. So,
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, you start digging out, gonna put a footer in or dig out to do a patio or something, then you bust into rock, and now all of a sudden you gotta have a whole 'nother piece of equipment.
right.
Okay, so how does fear or competition affect pricing, and really should it?
So that's the thing with the newer business owners. Um, they do have that emotional feeling, the fear, because they want to go and get the job. So they're just going to try and get everything. And they think if they can hustle through, just grab a job, and keep going, that's going to help. But mentally, it's going to exhaust them, and they're just not looking at their numbers. They're just seeing the cash that's coming through and seeing what they can make. So sometimes at the end of the month, they're out of funds, and then what do? They go and buy a loan from, like, I don't wanna say a loan shark, but there are some loans out there, that they are really ripping people
Practically
off.
like
Yes.
yeah,
Mhm.
they are practically like loan shark like legal loan sharks.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
they're awful. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, that is just you kind of just they end up layering the jobs basically just so they can rob Peter to pay Paul.
Right.
It's vicious cycle that it's really hard to get out of. So you got to know
Mhm.
those numbers, guys. Okay, we talked about hidden expenses. Um, what are some indirect expenses that contractors often fail to include in their pricing?
Sometimes it could be the payroll taxes because they don't know if they have, like, a set estimate on the people that are gonna be on the job, but they don't realize there's gonna be maybe, value add work or added work, or sometimes they're going into a job and then there's a problem. There's mold. Maybe they didn't account for that. Well, then all of a
Right.
sudden, now their employees are going overtime, so time and a half, but then those payroll expenses are going up because that's not what they were expecting. So when we are looking at the numbers, the actuals versus our estimate, how are we doing on that? Are we gauging, are we putting a little bit of a buffer in case, there is a problem that arises?
Yeah. So, which expense surprises contractors the most, do you think?
Um, well, I would definitely say the accounting one because they're like, I'm just going to do it myself. But
Uh,
but then they realize by that time, there could be things that they don't realize that they can go and put as an expense. So they're really paying more to the government than really what they need to. So it's things like that they want to think about. They want to be able to have, they are like, oh, I'm compliant. My taxes are done. My wife is doing my books. And it's like, okay, but is she certified? Is she catching these things? How is she advising you? How's your CPA advising you? Things like that. The gas, when it just fluctuated the last couple months, they're not expecting that. They're thinking they have estimated enough for the fuel, but then the fuel just went up, like crazy.
right.
So all their fleets of their trucks, filling up, things like that. So just some of the variable rates of some of the supplies as well. If they're not in where they're not coming off of the ships, if they're the stores, they don't have that, they have to go around and find other supplies somewhere else. So
Absolutely. Okay, so let's talk. We've used the term job costing. Let's define that for somebody that maybe doesn't know exactly what that looks like.
So you'll have a month worth of income and then you have all your expenses. And then you can get your profit margin that way. But say you have 5 jobs within that specific month. We don't want to commingle all those jobs, the income and all the expenses together for
Right.
that specific month. There are some businesses that can do that, but for the construction one, I would definitely suggest doing it per job. So I
Mhm.
have project A, this is what the price was. These are my expenses. Here is the weighted average for my indirect expenses. So we had talked about, like, we'll just say 3 jobs. One might be 33%, the other two, well, let's say the one is 60% of it, and then the other two are 20%. You can't just go and have your weighted average, or you can't have all your indirect costs the same across the board, because it wouldn't be fair to the 2 jobs that were the 20% of your total income, right?
Right.
It just
Right. They
would,
want a
it
good
would
average.
right, it would, offset
Even.
your profit margin, and you would think, "Oh, this wasn't actually a good job," but it actually could have been a good job.
Right.
So there's gonna be jobs. Number 1, you need clarity. You're giving your profit margin. If this is what you expect, great. If it's less, why? But then they might have a servant's heart and be like, I know this person, I did this as a favor. My profit margin's really low, but I'm okay because I'm giving back to my community. This is a job that we had done, things like that.
Uh-huh.
But just having those clear numbers just helps them with the decision. Do I need to increase my prices? A lot of people I've seen on social media get mad when contractors mark up their supplies. And they're like, well, why would you do that? Well, I am the one who had to go get it from the store. I'm the one who's prepaying, for all this material that we're going to be using. So yeah, you should go and, put a little bit of a margin on top of, your supplies. So a lot of people won't do that, but they should.
Yeah, they should. Because just for the number one reason, because when you priced the job and they paid, you go to sleep and you wake up and it's a different price.
Yeah.
And it's usually not going down. Let's
Hmm.
just say that. I had a I had somebody a lead for a deck, and this woman, I asked her what her budget was, and it was a whopping $500. And I said, one board is $35 right now. One board. So I don't know what kind. I told her you need to go get you a concrete preformed 3 steps steps.
And it's just the clients don't know.
They
So
don't know.
you have to give them value and explain, different things. And it's fine to go through, your invoice with them, but don't go and give them every single line item of a price, because
No.
then they'll be like, wait, what about this? What about that? So there are sometimes they're like so specific. You don't want to do that. You just explain why the value is the way it is.
Yeah.
y-
Yeah, that's what I did on mine. I gave them the price, and I usually had a 3 payment process, this before it got on the schedule, this by the time, this week, depending on how long the job was. And I had a very teeny tiny little bit of money left at the end. And that way, and I say that because if you have the majority, all my contractors out there, if you have the majority of your cost or your last payment on your project, at the finish be the biggest number, inevitably the client thinks that's your profit.
yeah.
Whether it still is paying for supplies, still paying for workers or whatever, they get in their head, oh, that must be their profit. So make that the smallest payment, just like a last little, kind of good faith thing.
Well, the other thing
Otherwise,
too is, I was gonna say, some clients will not pay that. Like,
yeah,
something will happen in the middle of the project, and they'll be like, "I'm not paying, this isn't done right." And then it just is not an advantage, and it's not fair to you because your crew has done, all this work.
yes. And it's usually gonna say, it's not happened to me very often at all, but it typically is the one that wanted everything for nothing. It's the one that wanted the cheapest price.
Yes.
They just struggle with money, and I don't know whether they run out or what. But yes, if you're going to have anything due at the end, you maybe don't have anything due at the end. I don't know. But
Yeah.
if you do, then make it the smallest amount. So, Amanda, you have created an Excel template that helps
Mhm.
contractors calculate profit margins and weighted indirect expenses. How does that system work?
So I usually will go and sorry, I'm trying to go find it now for so I can show you.
Okay.
I usually go and do it at the end. So I go and get the price of the project. We put the supplies on there, we put the labor on there, and then we put the indirect costs. So I try and make it simple. And I can share this, with you if you'd like. Um, I try and make it simple for them. So then it's just they can see that it's profitable, or they can see what the numbers are, whether it's profitable or not. But this is the other thing. If there is something that shows a great profit, it also helps with their marketing. Hey, they like these jobs. Not all jobs are canned, right? But at least if they can see, hey, this similar job is more profitable, that's how they can market. And that's the way that they can go. So it gives them, different things to think about as well. Um, are you
Good
okay with
point.
me
Yes.
sharing right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if you want to. Yeah. Yeah, I say that often that uh when you're kind of working with somebody, you if you do know those numbers better, then it does allow you to say, hey, this is my ideal customer. This is where my this is my money maker. So that's where we tend to, you're right, to put those profits or to put that marketing dollar to.
Yeah. Can you see my screen okay?
I can.
Okay. So it's just a simple um profit
Oh,
margin.
wait a minute. I'm seeing your screensaver. I'm seeing a cityscape and
Oh.
whatnot.
All right. So let's see if I could stop and share again. Okay. No.
Now, is this something that somebody gets when they work with you, or is this something they get when you do the audit with them?
So I can share with them, like how this has been done, but usually I just share this with my clients. So it
Okay.
just gives them like a little purview because it's just for them. So usually I have the template in case they want to go and use this to do their quotes, they can totally do that. And then I will go and do one for a specific month where we have more detail in here. But if
Okay.
I just go through the template first, everything in the yellow highlights is what they would add, and then
Uh,
everything in green is actually a formula. Over here, this is our monthly expenses. And so we have an annual price, but then I break it into our monthly price. So it's divided, by 12. So we get our monthly cost of the 6,500. So say for this just one job, I put in $10,000. Okay.
so
Um,
that's what the
Say the job.
revenue is on the
Yes.
job
Yep.
quote. Okay.
Yep. And then we're expecting, the owner to have a rate of 50. Our employee number one has a rate of 20. I put my
What
one,
kind of rate? What do you mean by rate?
I'm sorry, if they are they're
Hourly rate.
their hourly rate. Yeah,
Okay.
sorry. I'm just saying it's a small job, it's gonna take them 2 hours to do it. So we have our price. They would have to go and scan in. Um, I help them when I go and review their scanned receipts, then I would put this amount in. So say it's, $2,000. I have in my rate, times the amount of work. Here is my 6,500, and it is the full amount of the cost because this is the only job. So there's a weighted average, but it's going to be the full amount. And then I have my profit margin per job and then the percentage right here.
Okay.
So then if I go to May, I have a couple other, my project A was 519, project B was 2000, but then you'll see my weighted average here has changed because it's only worth, 289 worth of my expenses, so I can go and see what my rates are.
Okay.
So it's like the same thing, you just fill in the yellow, and then
Okay.
automatically have this because of the formulas that we have, and then it shows our
That's
profit
nice.
margin.
Okay.
So
Cool.
this just helps them, and then they can go and play with this and put this in for the future months. But then they also see, hey, this is what I have, this is what has helped in the past. And you just see these margins here. Is it what you expected? Did you do it for your neighbor next door and it's not as profitable? And it's okay. It just at least gives you clear data on what you can decide and what you would want with your business.
Great. Okay. All right. I'll have you stop sharing for now. There we go. Okay. So if a contractor listening today realizes they've been guessing instead of truly knowing their numbers, what's that first step that they should take?
But the first step is make sure you do have clean, clear books. Get that good bookkeeping system down. And then the second thing is making sure that you're reconciling every month. Because then, if you are reconciling to your bank accounts, if you're reconciling to your credit card, you're going to see if there's any duplicate expenses. Okay.
Mhm.
And that could be your leaks. And you could say, wait, that's already accounted for. Why do I have these extra expenses?
Yeah. Okay. Gives you clarity on it, doesn't it?
Hmm.
Okay. Okay, listeners, if today's conversation hit home and you're realizing you may not have a clear picture of where your money is actually going, this is your sign to stop guessing and start getting clarity. Amanda Dilenno offers a free audit for contractors who want to better understand their numbers, uncover those hidden profit leaks, and see where their margins may be slipping through the cracks. You can connect with Amanda on LinkedIn or follow her on Facebook to learn more and schedule your free audit conversation. Is that exactly where can they get a hold of you? Is there somewhere else, Amanda?
No, that's it. They can, reach me by email as well, or, they can just give me a call as well. But all the information is on my Facebook, and it is Amanda Dienno, and it's Diiennno. No,
Diinneo?
Diienno.
Okay. Okay. So contractors, don't wait until the stress piles up or the numbers force your hand. Sometimes one conversation and a little financial clarity can completely change the direction of your business. Because if there's one thing we hope you take away from today's episode is this: understanding your numbers isn't about becoming an accountant. It's about building a business that actually supports your life, your family, and your future.
Mhm.
So, listeners, if this conversation helped you realize there may be money leaking through the cracks in your business, don't ignore it. And also, if you want more conversations that help you grow smarter, scale stronger, and build with intentions, make sure you subscribe to the Builder's Edge because this is more than a podcast. This is your platform. Your story matters. Let's amplify your voice with purpose. And again, I'm Deanna Lucas, and we'll see you next time on the Builder's Edge.